to a Hindu. It had been written at the instance of Taraknath Das, an Indian revolutionary based in North America, for the journal called Indian Reformer. In that letter, Tolstoy quotes great texts from the Hindu faith, Krishna and the Gita, and also from the extraordinary work, the Tirukkural, the great Tamil classic, which is essentially a book of ethics, ethical principles. And he says in that, Tolstoy says in that, that love, not hate, is the only way in which the Hindu, by which he really meant the people of India, can overcome the British, not by violence, but by love. So this is something which chimed immediately with Gandhi, and then began a correspondence between the two. Manasi, I think I should stop here and continue later.
So you have just heard from Gopal Krishna Gandhi, who is a descendant of Mahatma Gandhi. It is interesting to me that for the first time, Gopal, you have met Daniel Tolstoy, who is the great grandson of Leo Tolstoy. So, Daniel, can I ask you to set the stage for us a little bit? Who is Leo Tolstoy at the time at which he writes this letter, and why is he writing this letter?
Well, first of all, he just encountered all the violences of the revolution in 1905, which was an effect of the Russian-Japanese War. And he came to see that, or believe that there was no solution to violence or injustices in the system if you follow the same methods as your oppressor. And so he starts by deciding to find a core in all religions, some ethical, moral code that would exist. And at the age of 45, learns ancient Greek to be able to translate the Gospels. And after a year, it said that he learned Greek so well that he could read Homer. And after 6 years of work, he translated and synthesized the Gospel into something that he would call the Gospel in brief. And also, this was the basis of his book, The Kingdom of God is Within You. As I think it's in that vein, and also I think he was proven right in his idea that violence begets violence, because if you look at the Russian Revolution that later happened in 17, which he unfortunately missed, society was, I mean, of course, the idea was to create equality, but the society that was created through violence was in fact much worse than the society that had existed before, and 20 million people died. And one could say that, I mean, it was exactly the same thing, slightly worse, but with different labels. And so I think that's when he heard about the struggle in India, it was very important for him that it would be done by non-violent, active but non-violent means, and through agape, the unconditional love that he found was the true meaning of life.
And can you also tell us a little bit about the contents of this letter, this extraordinary 6,000-word letter that he writes?
Yes, I mean, he takes the letter very seriously. It takes him several months, and he reads it and rewrites it. And the context of the letter is he tells us the commonality between Hindu and Christian faith, and at least the faith that he has, and this core simplified, but in his idea, honest Christianity. And he also criticizes the values of the West, of materialism, violence, and an over-reliance on technology. And he urges Indians not to follow the path of the West. But I'll read you a short extract from that letter, where he says, "You say that the English have enslaved your people and hold them in subjection, because the latter have not resisted enough and have not met force by force. But the case is just the opposite. If the English have enslaved the people of India, it is just because the latter recognize and still recognizes force as a fundamental principle of social order. In accordance with that principle, they submitted to the little Rajas, struggle on their behalf against one another, fought the Europeans and English. You are not trying to fight with them again. A commercial company enslaved a nation comprising 200 million people. Tell this to a man who is free from superstition, and he will fail to grasp what these words mean. What does it mean that 30,000 men, not athletes, but other weak and ordinary people, have subdued 200 million vigorous, clever, capable, and freedom-loving people? Do not the figures make it clear that it is not the English who have enslaved the Indians, but the Indians who have enslaved themselves?
You say it took him. You say it takes him several months to write it. In fact, it takes him 7 months, 29 drafts, and over 400 pages before he is able to put this letter together. That is an extraordinary amount of effort that Tolstoy has put into it. And so, how exactly does Gandhi respond to this?
Well, Manasi has put us straight into the questions and given very little time for what may be called a buffer. But I want to say here, just by way of a contextual introduction, before answering Manasi's very specific question, that at the time of this exchange, Tolstoy was 80 years old, and Gandhi was 40. And so you might have, the audience here might have expected the Tolstoy descendant to be a venerable old gentleman and the Gandhi descendant to be somewhat younger. But in actual fact, this Gandhi descendant had to lean on this Tolstoy descendant's hand to climb these steps and come onto the stage. So the fact is that in London, the original Gandhi was leaning on Tolstoy's hand very strongly and firmly and got Tolstoy's support to face the problems of the day, which were not just about the Indians in South Africa, but now to come to Manasi's question. It was about what really may be called the human condition. And I want to read from Gandhi's first letter to Tolstoy, written immediately after he had read this extraordinary document called the Letter to a Hindu. But before I do that, I also want to read a couple of lines which Tolstoy